So let's get right on to astrology, and let's talk about the curriculum for today. We will be dealing with the introduction, as I said. Then we will be dealing with the fundamentals. They are an absolute requirement to diligently being able to handle the issues of chart interpretation, charts, dealing with astrology in general. You have to know the basics. They are tools of the trade, and without knowing them, you can't do anything. And I want to emphasize this with speaking to you in all caps and exclamation marks behind astrology. You will not be able to deal with astrology, okay? Because there are several aspects to astrology where you won't be able to go and consult a source to what this or that is. You need to deal with it and shoot from the hip. So you need to know it so that you can really deal with it effectively, okay? First, we'll be dealing with the planets. We'll be dealing with the elements. We'll be dealing with the signs, the houses, the rulers, and the three archetypes of astrology and their link to karma, the aspects. We'll be dealing with that. Then we'll be dealing with graphing a chart. Then we'll be evaluating a chart at first glance before we leave, and also the chart interpretation and the tools for it. So we have a very, very full plate. We will need probably up to 2 hours. I'm hoping to get through the basics and the fundamentals in the first hour. If we run a little bit over, that's fine. You will not need to take notes on the first part, because I'll give you a link for that at the end of the class where all the notes are. So you don't have to worry about that. So let's plunge into it and start with when astrology began, and where it began, and how did it begin, and where did we get it from. It originated back in Sumeria, which is today the lower part of Iraq, ancient culture that was around 4,000 years, 3,000, 4,000 years before Christ. And the people who lived there, old Babylon and all those cities, received divine instruction from above. They were channeling information from the other side, who told them, look, guys, if you want to know more about astrology, you need to do this and that and the other. This thing stands for that, that thing stands for that, and that thing stands for that. And so they got everything given to them from revelation. And on top of that, they did empirical observations, which is very important. And that is a critical part for us as we work with astrology. Very simply, let me give you an example. A farmer has a cow, okay? And every year, for example, the cow, when there's a full moon, one of the cows in the herd dies. Let me just give you an example. Then the farmer then suddenly finds out that when they're in a certain location, then the farmer says, well, I'm going to switch the cows to a different location, and he switches the cows to a different location, and the cows don't die. So he draws the conclusion that, well, if the cow stays in that field, they die. If they stay in the other field, they don't die. So we need to pay attention to that, not only where they are, but we also need to pay attention to the full moon. So, and this is just a hypothetical sort of silly example, but that's what empirical information is all about. The second thing is astrology something that is of divine origin? And is it something that the Confederation of Planets and all their members, Yeshua, Michael, Gabriel, do they all endorse it? And the answer is yes, they endorse it very much. In fact, they have explained to us in great detail how it works and how it doesn't work. They are fully aware of what's going on, and they are the masters of it. I will give you the layman's three critical mistakes when approaching astrology. And I just want to make sure that you don't make these mistakes in astrology. If you make them, it can be very detrimental to what you're doing. before I do that, I will also emphasize to you that the purpose today is not to give you or for you to become a professional astrologer. That is not the intent. When I started out with astrology, when I was, we need to admit some people in the waiting room, by the way, guys. When I started out with astrology, I was 20 years old, and I was working with a partner, a good friend of mine, and we were living in Norway at the time, and getting information about astrology was not as simple as you think. We had to order our books from London. That took 3 months about, because they had to receive payment first, and then it went by regular mail, meaning by ship, from England to Norway. And it took years and years. But I had a very good teacher, a famous astrologer in Norway, the most famous one at the time, who happened to be living just a few blocks away from us. And we got to learn about astrology. And one of the first things I was made very clear of was that if you want to know astrology, you have to know the fundamentals, and you have to know them by heart. Okay. I had a discussion with a family member this morning as to, whether there was anything in what we're going to be talking about today that family member didn't know. And I said, there's nothing about what we're going to be talking about today that you do know, because your understanding of knowing things and my understanding are totally different. You see, if I ask you, do you know the Lord's Prayer? You say, yes, I know the Lord's Prayer. My next question is, can you please recite it for me? And you recite the Lord's Prayer. That's what I call knowing something. You know it by heart. That means that if I ask you, for example, can you please describe the 3 most prominent features of Pisces, you are able to recite it immediately. If I ask you, give me the characteristics of Leo, the 3 top ones, you recite it immediately. You don't come with vague answers. You don't come with maybe answers. You come with very specific answers, because you know it's like you're going to learn vocabulary in a new language. If you're going to learn Spanish, for example, there are new words to be learned. They have to be learned by heart. You can't, get yourself through it by haphazard type of answers. The second mistake that people often make when they have or deal with astrology is believing that one sign is superior to another sign. That is simply not the case. All signs have their own value, and they are very important. By that, I will also add another very important thing. You think of astrology as a wheel with 12 signs. You saw the wheel earlier when I had it up on the screen here, the 12 signs of the zodiac. There are 6 energies in the zodiac. There are the sign that we're talking about and the opposite sign. Leo has an opposite sign of Aquarius. That is 1 energy. Those are not 2 energies. There are 2 aspects of the same energy. So there are 6 energies really to talk about in the zodiac. And there are the sign and the corresponding sign, or the opposite sign, Aries, Libra, and so on and so forth. So that's very important. The third mistake is for you to believe, to present to yourself or to others, that astrology is fatalistic. Oh, it's written in the stars, this will happen to you, you will do this, you will do that. Nothing could be further from the truth. A wise man controls the stars. He is not controlled by the stars. And that's an important one, and it will become more and more important as we go into 4th density, because there you will have a more spiritual approach to everything around you, not just astrology. Another very important thing to look at is that every moment, every event, every happening is celestially imprinted, not only births. When you think of astrology, you think, oh, that person is born, that person is a Leo, that person is that person is, Scorpio, whatever, that person has this in their chart or that in their house. Yes, that is the case. But every event, the day you got married, if you did, that moment has a celestial imprint in it that is a chart by itself. So we'll show you how to draw charts about specific events as well next time when we meet in a month. But every single event, not just, for example, the day the United States was founded and the Declaration of Independence was signed, that day, that hour, that moment, in that place, you can draw the horoscope for that, and you will see the horoscope of the United States. For example, all right, the day Putin invaded the Ukraine, you can do the chart for that moment when he did that. So that's very important, because this could be a wedding date, it could be a divorce date. You know, the moment you acquire a real property, you buy a house, for example, the day you sign the papers at the title company, the hour that you sign it, you can draw a horoscope for that moment, and you will find out what will happen with that property down the line. When it's a good time to sell it, when it's a good time to refurbish it, if it's a good property, if there's hidden problems with it, all of that will be in the horoscope. And it's called secular astrology. You admit it to the hospital on a given day, on a given hour. The moment you meet another person, or the moment you engage with a certain person, from a partnership point of view. I wanted to say that because most of us only think about human beings, but moments, every moment in time. This very moment that I'm speaking right now has a chart and a horoscope and a planetary position that reflects the moment today. It's nothing significant today, but if it were, we could look at it and we could make our interpretations. No need to take notes on the screen material that I'm giving you today, except for this introduction that just passed, but because you will be given a link at the end of this lesson with all the material that is coming up now. So let's plug right along. And let's start with the planets. The planets are symbols of energy. They are an energy of life force. They can be an energy of action. They can be an energy of love. They can be an energy of impulsiveness. They can represent an energy of stability, for example, Saturn. So keep in mind that planets are energy. I'll give you an example. Mars, for example, as a planet, is an energy. It can be an energy for good, but it can also be an energy for bad. And it can also be a totally passive energy. But Mars is not good, and Mars is not bad. Mars is an energy that activates good or bad. That's an example of what energy is all about, all right? So let's start with the sun, our most important energy in the horoscope. The sun tells us of the actual core of a person, the inner self, and that which is of central concern. So when you are born a Capricorn, you will have the inner self of that Capricorn in you and all the characteristics of the Capricorn. And we'll talk about them in a little bit. But first, let's go through the planets. It also shows us the general vitality and the ability to assert yourself. It describes the general tone of being which colors everything else. And the sun rules Leo. In other words, the sun is the native planet to Leo. All right. Number two, the moon. When you think about a planet, you need to think about the essential quality of the planet. If you go back to the sun, for example, what does the sun do? The sun is responsible for radiation, physical radiation, and of course, spiritual radiation. The sun has a tremendous spiritual radiation, okay? The spiritual qualities of the sun are unmatched by any other orbiting planet in its own system. There are multiple celestial forces that live inside the sun. You might think, oh my gosh, they're going to burn up. No, they're not physical beings, they're spiritual beings. Temperature is not an issue. If it were, they'd be quite cold outside on the other side, away from the sun. But they are spiritual entities. Akhenaton, for example, as a spiritual entity, who was the reincarnation later on of Moses, he stays in the sun all the time. High density entity. When you think of the moon, you ask yourself, what is so specific about the moon and what is special about the moon? Well, the moon reflects the sun. So anytime you deal with the moon in a horoscope, you're talking about reflection of something. And the moon represents our feelings and our emotions, the receptivity, the imagination, and the basic feeling tone of a person. Also, okay, it also has an effect on the sense of rhythm because, you know, the lunar calendar has its own rhythm, time and timing. It influences our adaptability to change and our mobility and versatility. The moon is changing, okay, and that's an important thing. Can we admit somebody into the room, please? Now, the moon rules Cancer. So everything that has to do with the moon is feeling, emotions, but also changing, adaptability. For example, if a person has a moon prominently displayed in the area that deals with work in a horoscope, that person will change jobs, just like you and I will change underwear. On the other hand, if a planet of stability is in that job aspect, that person will not change jobs very often or very likely. The next planet is Mercury, which rules both Gemini and Virgo. It represents reason, reasonableness, common sense, if you will, that which is rational. It stands for the spoken and the written word. It represents putting things in order, weighing and evaluating, the process of learning and skills, trade and communication. And it rules Gemini and Virgo, like we said. Virgo, if you were to read a description of the Roman god Mercury, you will find out that Mercury is also heavily involved in trade. It's involved in travel, very quick travel, mental traveling, thought travel, all sorts of travels, but also trade and interconnection with people. Venus, most of us know Venus. Venus today is a fifth and sixth density planet. It's very, very strong, love-oriented, and it gives us a sense of beauty, the enjoyment of pleasure, aesthetic awareness. I mean, arts, love and harmony, sociability, taking pleasure in relationships, and also eroticism. The sign equivalents are Libra and Taurus. Both of them are ruled by the planet Venus. So that's an easy one to remember. Most of us know that Venus is associated with love, but it's also aesthetic awareness and specifically arts very heavily. Mars represents the energy and the drive of a person, their courage. It represents determination. It represents the freedom of spontaneous impulse. Mars is a type of energy that doesn't think too much. It just moves forward and then it asks questions. The common sense is sort of on the side shelf with Mars. Mars it's just you opening a faucet. You're not asking if it's hot or cold. You just want water to come out. That's Mars. And it also describes the readiness for action, meaning move forward. The way one goes about doing things, as well as simple aggression, can be controlled by it. If Mars is poorly aspected, we'll talk about that later. It rules the planet Aries as its primary sign. Mars is an entity where the spirit source for many of the third density individuals on this planet came from. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, here he goes, there were little green men on Mars. No, I'm talking about spirit entities that were used as the source for our consciousness, soul consciousness, as we developed and moved over to planet Earth, because Mars became inhabitable for a variety of reasons. Okay. Jupiter, the search for individual meaning and purpose. This is a very important planet because Jupiter, in old mythology, if you look at the Roman mythology, Jupiter is the equivalent of Zeus in the Greek mythology, and Jupiter was the number one deity for the Romans and for many others. And it represents optimism, hope, and a sense of justice. And it also represents faith, a basic philosophy of life, the striving for spiritual growth and expansion, good fortune, and positive energy. It rules Sagittarius. So Jupiter is a bringer of good reason, of good justice, good faith, good luck also. If you ever needed luck, Jupiter will be involved in all good things happening to you. Then we have Saturn, its brother. It shows how we experience reality, where we meet with resistance and discover our limitations. It is the energy of the conscience and moral conviction. In other words, keeping a steady keel. That is what Saturn is all about. It rules the laws for which we choose to obey. Follow the law would really apply to Saturn. It also represents older people. And it also tells us about our powers of endurance and the ability to concentrate. It lends qualities to earnestness, caution, and reservation or reserve. So illness is the underlying force of Saturn. Karmic lessons are learned through Saturn, among others, not only, but to a great degree. If you read about Job in the Bible, the book of Job, and his tremendous torments and illness that he went through, that was all Saturn holding a steady keel over him. And Saturn rules Capricorn, the sign of steadiness and stability, among others. Uranus is the energy of intuition. It transmits sudden inspiration and lightning insights. Uranus is a very exciting planet. It's I hate to admit it, but it's one of my favorites of all the planets. I really associate with it because it gives an openness for all that is new, unknown, and unusual. So it is said to be characteristic of astrology as such. Astrology is represented by Uranus. It's a sort of wrong-headed contrariness, which is also associated with this planet. Impulsiveness, non-conformity, and Uranus rules Aquarius. So it's also a very socially minded planet that doesn't think so much about the individual, but thinks about the global environment, global social environment that we live in. Uranus will always be involved in all good things that happen. For example, we're entering into the world of Aquarius. We have entered into it. We're at the beginning of the age of Aquarius. Remember, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. So we are going to see many of these Uranus signs coming up in the age of Aquarius. Be not surprised that you will see things that are non-conformity driven, relative to religion, relative to food, relative to energy. A lot of things will change. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. It is a planet that gives us all the supersensory. It opens energies to mystical experiences, with or without the supplements to achieve them. I'm talking about drugs and everything else. The transcendental and the spiritual. On this level, it is hard to discern where the perception moves into deception, and it is hard to discern when illusion and false appearances occur, because one of the typical things about Neptune is nebulosity, meaning things are not clear. You will never be able to, I wouldn't say never, but you will very seldom be able to really clearly focus on a problem with Neptune, because Neptune will throw in a smoke cloud in there, in your problem, so that you can really see what's going on. And so it's also associated with all of these, with drugs and all kinds of pseudo realities. When people deal with all sorts of, crazy mushrooms, you name it, all of that is Neptune. Drugs, the pharmaceutical industry is ruled by Neptune. Everything that has to do, that can change your perception in any way, is ruled by Neptune. Pluto describes how we deal with the energy of power. Pluto is a power planet, personal and non-personal, be it through suffering the power of others or exercising it ourselves. If you look at for example, the horoscope of Hitler, Pluto was prominent in his horoscope in terms of personal domination and rulership. It describes how we meet the demonic and magical. It's our regenerative powers, life and birth, of course, and our capacity for radical change and rebirth on the spiritual level. The cycles of dying and becoming are therefore part of Pluto, and it also rules intense sexuality. Tantra yoga, for example, is driven by Pluto to the nth degree. Scorpio, think of the animal which rules Pluto, is known to be a fairly deadly animal. It will kill to provide rebirth. So it's a very strong planet. It's also far out. You need to know that a convention in Vienna just a few years ago decided that Pluto was not any longer a planet, but an asteroid belt. That is still under discussion, but Pluto is Pluto, and whatever they decide, it is an astrological body. So here are the symbols. You need to know the symbols. This is important. Because they're used in the horoscope. When we write about astrology, when we interpret astrology, we don't write Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter. We show the symbols. So you need to know what those symbols are without hesitation. If I show you a 3-pronged fork, you need to know that that's Neptune. Okay? If I show you the Venus sign, you can't ask me, is that Mercury or is that Mars? I don't remember. You need to know that. Okay? So you'll be able to study those. If you doubt what they are, because this chart I won't give you, but it's available out there anywhere you want on the internet, just go to Google and type in astrological symbols, and you will have them all. That's where this chart comes from. All right. That was the planets. And now let's talk about the elements that are indications of traits and temperaments. The elements are indications of traits and temperaments. So we have the element of fire, which is spontaneous and impulsive. Fire people apply their energies wholeheartedly. They have an all-in mentality. There's sort of like not a let's stick our toe in it and let's see what goes on. They go for it. There's a quick emotional response, lively imagination. The fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. If we can let somebody in the room, that would be nice. The element signs, fire and the others, are separated by 120 degrees. In other words, they're spread out in a circle. There are 3 of them, and there is 120 degrees between each of them. So the distance between on a circle between Aries and Leo is 120 degrees. Leo to Sagittarius 120 degrees, and 120 degrees again back to Aries from Sagittarius. Air people are quick and animated. They apply their energies in a very diverse way. They tend to intellectualize their feelings and they intellectualize their expectations. The three signs that are air are Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. When I talked to you about earlier about being able to know your fundamentals by heart, if I ask you, give me the typical characteristics of an air person, you need to be able to recite it. Quick, animated, intellectualize their feelings. Those are keywords that need to come to you right away. Water, of course, feeling type oriented, very sensitive. They live deep, rich, imaginative, and emotional lives. 3 water signs: Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Those are the water signs. Earth signs, they react quietly and slowly. They apply themselves with endurance. Emotionally, they're deeply rooted and they are slow to change. Once an earth person has made up their mind to do something, you're just not going to go in and, entice them to change course. That doesn't happen that quickly with earth signs. Capricorns are earth signs. Taurus are earth signs. Virgos are earth signs. Mao Zedong, for example, was a Capricorn. So was our friend Elvis Presley. So they are very steady signs, elements. All right. Let's talk about the next element, which is the houses. They denote the location where things take place. Okay, so when you deal with astrology, we will also talk about the signs, of course, and what they do and how they are. But the houses denote where things happened. If I tell you, for example, that you're going to be driven by a lot of love, that really is not going to help you very much, because it doesn't help you where that love is directed. Is it going to be to your mother? Is it going to be to your work? Is it going to be to your neighbor? Is it going to be to your siblings? Is it going to be to the arts? So the houses are critically important because they tell you where stuff is going to happen. Okay, so the first house is the house of the ascendant, and it's the house of the individual personality. It's a very important house because the line of the ascendant in the chart, imagine a circle in front of you and imagine a line that goes straight through it horizontally. That horizontal line is the horizon. That's why it's called the horizontal line. It's the horizon. Literally, when you were born, that line represents the horizon. So together with the sun and the moon, which are the two most prominent bodies, celestial bodies, the ascendant is one of the most important single factors in a horoscope. The sign at the beginning of the first house tells us a lot about a person's personality, temperament, and constitution. It typifies our immediate instinctive reaction and shows how we present ourselves to the world. The planet ruling the ascendant is of particular importance for the interpretation of an astrological chart. So let me give you an example where the ascendant can come in and play a major role. A person, let's say, is born in Cancer. That means that the sun is in the sign of Cancer at the moment the person was born. However, you know this person well, and this person is really not behaving and doesn't have the characteristics of a Cancer. I'm sure many of you have seen that in other people. You think, oh, a person is Taurus, but oh, he doesn't look like a Taurus. He looks more like a Pisces to me. You may have the sun in Taurus, like in this example, and all the other planets, or many of the other planets, 4 or 5 or 6 of the other planets may be in a different sign. Let's say they are in Sagittarius. And you say, well, I don't recognize this person because Taurus is a very fixed sign and an earth sign. And he should be very, very, down to earth and difficult to move around and difficult to convince and this and that. He should be the symbol of stability. Well, no, he is actually a Sagittarius for all practical purposes in the body of a Taurus, if you will. Of course, the two of them will react very positively together, but that's just the way it is. So keep in mind that the first house will show the outward personality of the person, and the sun sign will show the inner personality of it. In other words, the sun and the moon will show the inner personality of a person. The ascendant will show the outer face that person shows. All right. And sometimes the sun sign is the same as the ascendant, in which case you are double sign. I'm a Leo, but I also have my ascendant in Leo. I'm a double Leo. How about that? And that may be the case with you, whatever sign you are. You'll find that out in a little bit. The second house is the house of values and possessions. And let me also go back, I'm going to go back here and make one more comment on the first house because it's so important. These houses assumes, rightfully so, that the horoscope starts in Aries. So the first house, if you will, the ascendant, is the house of Aries. So if you want to know what the house is all about, Aries represents that first house, the individual personality. The second house, which is the house of Taurus, if you will, originally, because Taurus is the second sign of the horoscope from Aries. The second sign is Taurus. The second house is the house of Taurus. What do we associate Taurus with? Well, a field, for example. You plow the field. You have values and you have possessions. So the second house and its occupants, meaning their planets, tell us about the material circumstances, the acquisitive urge, and how to deal with possessions and material means. This includes the relationship to our own body. All right, this is very important. I don't know if you read the news just recently, just 2 days ago. Priscilla Presley is contesting the will that was left by the daughter because she was taken out of the will mysteriously, and the signatures don't match supposedly on the two versions of the will. First, the one that was left by the daughter and the Lisa Marie, and the other one that was changed. I looked at it. The second house is involved, and guess which other planet is involved there? Neptune is involved in it to provide confusion and lack of clarity in that process. All right, the third house is the house of communication. Now, that's the house of Gemini. Gemini, remember, is an air sign ruled by Mercury. So in the third house, communication is the center word. Many planets occupy that, the third house, and any planets occupying it in the third house tells us also about our siblings, the manner in which we communicate, and communication on an everyday level, and the relationships which determine our daily life. So communication, third house, siblings, very important. All right. Fourth house, an important house for many of us because it deals with roots and origins. And it's the house of Cancer, the fourth sign of the zodiac. It describes our origins. And when I'm talking about your origins, the first thing that should come to your mind is your mother and your father, the parental home and the circumstances influencing childhood and youth. Okay, it describes how we relate to family. Fourth house is the house of the family and our attitudes towards our home. The father image and the relationship to the real father are also to be found here. The real father being the one on the other side, of course. So the fourth house is very important. Now, remember, I told you Cancer is a female sign, actually, because it's the planet of the moon, it's the moon that rules the planet excuse me, it's the moon that rules the sign of Cancer. The opposite sign to the fourth house would be the 10th house, exactly opposite. Remember, I told you we have 6 energies in astrology. Well, the 4th and the 10th house is one energy, of course. So the 4th house really represents the mother. If you go to the other side, to the 10th house, you'll find the father, actually more than in the 4th house. But both of them have a finger in that pie. The 5th house, one you should like, it's the house of pleasure and creativity. I call it the Las Vegas house. I mean, anything can happen there in 5th house. Sexuality and eroticism are at home here, along with play in general and all types of creative expression. I mean, artistic creative expression. I mean, theater expression, artistic expression, creativity, massive creativity in this sign. All major artists that have done anything halfway decent on this planet have had the 5th house strongly involved in one way or another, and it describes also how we relate to children, how to relate to general fun, entertainment, simple fun, pleasure. It's a good house, okay? It's a house to relax in. Nothing much serious, because we need the non-serious side also. Astrology knows it really well. The 6th house is work and routine. A little bit more serious, a steep departure from the 5th house, which describes the circumstances surrounding our daily lives, including work environments and daily routine. This includes our behavior towards subordinates. Bodily hygiene also are important here, because the 6th house controls the bowels, among others, the lower intestines, the colon, among others. We can talk about physical or medical astrology next week sometime. But it also, or next session, and it also has tendencies to deal with certain acquired illnesses. So 6th house deals with work and routine, certain illnesses, because the 6th house is so concentrated on the lower part of our physical body, where there are a lot of very important organs, okay, in internal organs. The 7th house has to do with relating. The descendant sign, okay, you see that it says descendant sign. I thought we had talked about the ascendant sign earlier. Yes, that is the 1st house. But what is the 1st house plus 6 houses? That's the 7th house. So the opposite to the 1st house is the 7th house. The 1st house is the ascendant. The 7th house is the descendant. So the descendant house and planets, which is the 7th house, occupies the 7th house and tells us about how we select our partners and describes the relationships and the relationships we seek. So the 1st house is about me, ego, me, Mark, me, personality, me, everything. The 7th house is partner, everything, you, everything. Often we are involuntarily attracted to people whose horoscopes carry a strong emphasis of the sign in our 7th house, okay? So if you want to know if a person is very partner oriented or has something special going on, 7th house will be involved. The 8th house, loss and common property. Remember, this is the house of Scorpio. Scorpio has to do with death and regeneration. The old fable about Phoenix rising up from the ashes, that's a sign of Scorpio. So the 8th house shows how we relate to communal goods and how we deal with material loss. The taxes levied upon us each year are a good example for this and show how closely related these areas are. Traditional astrology also maintains that this house has an affinity to death and all things metaphysical Okay, death would then be the ultimate material loss in the Scorpio environment. Amongst other things, the study of metaphysics can be a very differentiated way of dealing with loss, which inevitably comes to all of us. Death does. So the eighth house again has to do with loss and common property and how we deal with it. Yeah, okay. So we can deal with that later. The ninth house, the house of Sagittarius. Remember, the sign of Sagittarius is a horse with a rider sitting on top of the horse, and the rider has a bow and an arrow in his or her hand pointing towards the sky. Okay, that is the sign of Sagittarius. And so therefore, the ninth house deals with philosophies. That's the arrow pointing upwards to the sky, looking at the sky. And far countries, that's where the horse will get you. So the ninth house describes our spiritual leaning, life philosophy, worldview. In fact, these are often influenced by journeys to foreign countries. If you want to see people traveling, for example, Mercury, which is a planet of travel, you see it in the ninth house, there's going to be travel involved. If you see the moon in the ninth house, there's going to be travel involved, a lot of it, okay, because the moon is changing all the time. People who are in military encampments, for example, that get stationed in various bases every so often, every year or every 2 years, very often there is a ninth house involvement. The attitudes cultivated and formed in this house can greatly influence matters of the 10th house. So we'll see the 10th house below, and the 10th house is the MC, the medium Cheli, which deals with occupation and calling. This is where you are meant to go in life. This house is of particular importance since it affects not only our choice of profession and our sense of calling, it also has a bearing on our general development, what we become, and this continues through our lives. And the sign in which the 10th house is, and the house is always driven by where it starts, not where it ends. So if it starts in Aries, you have Aries in the 10th house, and it may finish in Taurus, but you are a 10th house occupant in Aries and not in Pisces. So according to tradition, this house describes the mother image and the relationship to the real mother. We talked about the father and the mother earlier. All right, the 11th house is the house of friends and acquaintances. The 11th house describes how we relate to friends, benefactors, and teachers, people who wish us well and from whom we can learn. It's a positive house, a little bit like the 5th house. You know, what is 5 plus 6, by the way? That's 11. So that's the complementary house to the 5th house, the house of pleasure and sexuality and creativity and all that. The 11th house is the complement to that. So the two of them balance each other out. The one gives reason to the other. And it also shows us in these roles how we can learn. This house shows how we can relate to society in general in which we live in. It's a very good house. People with 11th house planets are driven by friends. They can't most of the time live without friends. Their whole life is built around friends because that's what the 11th house is all about. There are plenty of people like that. You say, oh my gosh, I can't understand. This person is out partying all the time. They always see friends. They can never settle down and never relax. They're 11th house junkies, okay? Too many planets in the 11th house. All right, 12th house, the house of Pisces. So that's beyond the personal. We know the 2 Pisces, it's a very spiritual sign. It's probably the most spiritual sign of the zodiac. It represents those spheres of life in which the individual no longer plays a part, where we step back for a greater whole and lose ourselves in another greater whole, if you will. Astrology sees hospitals also, prisons and psychiatric institutions in this house. It is also associated with monasteries and other retreats. In other words, the 12th house is a sign of seclusion. Dreams are controlled in the 12th house. Sleep is controlled in the 12th house. For example, if you have Jupiter in the 12th house, Jupiter is remember, the good energy, strong energy. If you have Jupiter in the 12th house, you will love to sleep. You will love your bed. Okay. I happen to know it because I have it there. And it's a tremendous source, but at the same time, be careful. It also covers secluded institutions. I've been studying to some detail the horoscope of Harry, the Prince of England, the son of the king, and all his shenanigans, and he has in his horoscope, the 12th house represents the Windsor Castle, because the Windsor Castle is a closed entity that nobody can just get any access to. It is a private and secluded entity, and you wouldn't know the stuff that is coming down through that house in his horoscope at this moment. It is absolutely stuff that most people wouldn't be able to take. So just a comment on the tabloid side of the 12th house. All right, let's quickly go through this, and let's talk about the rulers, because they are the planets associated with their respective signs. And this will be dealt with more extensively when we deal with interpretation. But you can see here on this chart the planets that are associated with the various signs. If you look on the very top of the screen, you see what looks like a mane, the sign of Leo. Next to it, the sign of Cancer on the right, and next on the left, you see the sign of Virgo. You see the sun right below the dark brown color of the mane there. That means that the sun is the ruling planet of Leo. Moon is the ruling planet of Cancer. Going clockwise, Mercury is the ruling planet of Gemini, Venus of Taurus, Mars of Aries, and so on. Now, when we come to Pisces, you see that Neptune is there, but so is also Jupiter. So Pisces is ruled by a major planet and a minor planet. The major planet being Neptune, and the minor planet being, there is an influence of Jupiter in Pisces, and so on and so forth. One note is that on Aquarius, which is in yellow on the bottom of the chart, the major planet there is Uranus, but the way Uranus is depicted here is a German, the way the Germans denote Uranus. So don't follow that. You'll see the true symbol for Uranus when we come down to another chart. All right, so you need to know this chart by heart. You can't hesitate. If I ask you what is the ruling planet of Libra, you answer Venus without hesitation. It's like 2 + 2 is 4. What is 5 × 3? It's 15. It's not like, oh my gosh, okay, is it 14 or 16? No, I think it's 15. No, you have to know the answer immediately without hesitation when it comes to the rulers. Okay, fundamental knowledge, remember, you have to know it by heart. So we're about to finish here, and we're going to take a 3-minute break after this, and then, or a 5-minute break, and then we'll start with setting up our horoscope. I know nobody here wants to learn how to set up the horoscope. You all want to know about the fundamentals. So, but I decided not to skip it anyways, okay? Just to help you out. There are 3 fundamental archetypes for astrology that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to share them with you because they denote how your karma is represented in your horoscope, and I will give you the verification of that after we set up the horoscope on our system here. So the 3 fundamental archetypes are very specific, and they all, like I said, deal with karma. Let me give you the definition of karma. Karma is the lack of forgiveness. The reason you and I are here is because we lacked forgiveness in our last incarnation, had we been complete in our forgiveness of ourselves in the last incarnation, we would be ascended. Hello, this is important stuff. So the lack of forgiveness is shown in a horoscope. And it is shown with a red line when you draw a horoscope. The tools that you're going to be using to overcome that karma and to get rid of that problem in this life is denoted in a horoscope with the blue line. So the red line is the lack of forgiveness. The blue line is the toolbox that you're going to use to get rid of it. And if you can do it in this lifetime, and you can, you're home free. But you got to bat it every time. All right? This is critically important if you want to understand the spiritual side of astrology. Okay? We talked about this very, very briefly at our last Spiritual Saturday, but I will bring it in here just for a second. This is our first archetype. An archetype is a pattern given to us by the universe which impacts us in a specific way. There are multiple patterns. Okay? This is the law of one that you're looking at. The archetype for the law of one. If I wanted to show you a symbol to describe completeness, fullness, no beginning, no end, I would show you the circle. An astrological wheel is a circle. It's an archetype of wholeness. It is an archetype of the law of one. But that symbol is also part of certain elements of the horoscope, which are called the aspects, which is the final mini chapter on the fundamentals, which is coming up. Here's the second one, the square. The square is a symbol of karma, obstacles, things that haven't been resolved. The angles of the square are 90 degrees, and they represent humanness and things that need to be worked on. Things are not smooth in a square, and it can be unstable. Here's the third archetype that is critical and vital in astrology, the triangle. There is no stronger, other than the circle, there is no stronger archetype than the trine. You will notice that every angle here of the trine, if you put it on a circle, the orb, if you will, between each point will be 120 degrees. Not the inner angle, but the outer angle when you put it on a wheel. And we'll talk about that in a second. I'll show you some examples. But the trine is important. It is the strongest manifestation of energy that you can have. That's why the Confederation is dealing with the Trinity, and they're not dealing with the square. You know, it's the Trinity. All right. Finally, we're approaching the home stretch here. We're dealing with the aspects. The aspects are the angular relationships between 2 points, for example, 2 planets. And the 7 most dominant aspects are the following. Number 1, a conjunction. A conjunction tends to be a harmonious aspect. Its quality depends greatly on the planets involved, as well as on how close the aspect is. The closeness of that aspect, by the way, is referred to the tolerance. And normally we give it maximum 8 degrees. The closer it is, the more poignant it will be, and the stronger it will be. For example, a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury is generally regarded as harmonious. If, however, the distance between them is less than a few degrees, Mercury is said to be burnt or in combustion, with corresponding results. So in general, the conjunction shows an immediate connection, which easily can work in one way or another, depending on what is involved. Opposition, 2 planets are in opposition on one side each of the horoscope. Although the opposition is generally regarded as disharmonious or dynamic, it often has a quite motivating and energizing effect. You know, the statement of opposites attract. Well, opposites can also create great enemy. Here too, the quality of the aspect depends on the planets involved and on what one makes of it. On the whole, an opposition between two planets creates tension, but often with positive results. The square, we're going back to our archetype of the square. It is 90 degrees. It's regarding a disharmonious aspect. The energy seems to be blocked. The problems that arise from the square keep on turning up and up and up. Why? Because we haven't resolved them, okay? Like a bad penny. The difficulty lies in trying to reconcile two forces that are trying to move in completely different directions. It's a task that you're supposed to solve. That's part of your karma. Usually this takes the form of desires and needs which are mutually exclusive. You're not using the right tools for the right job, in other words. Using the wrong tool. Semi-square, the 45 degrees, it's like the square, but the semi-square is also a disharmonious aspect with half the impact of its bigger brother, the square. The trine is 120 degrees. Again, goes back to the triangle. It is the harmonious aspect. The planets involved work together in a complementary fashion, enriching one another. And the trines show us where our natural talents lie. Whether we actually make use of them is up to us. But trine is very positive. Sextile, think of the Star of David. When you think of sextiles, two inverted, two triangles, the sextile has a harmonious effect. It's a subcategory of the trine, depending on the course of the planets involved. And finally, here you have how they are depicted. Now you see on the conjunct and the opposition, the symbol involved there is the circle, the law of one, okay? So on the square and the trine, you have the same thing. The semi-square and the sextile are a derivation of what's happening with the square and the trine and the square respectively. So you need to know by heart what these graphic representations stand for. If I ask you to draw me a conjunction, you know exactly to draw the far left picture that you have there. Do we have any questions of any kind? I haven't seen any questions come through here, so I assume everybody is just absorbing.
Well, we do have one question which was posed by Nadine, and I think it's already been answered. She asks, is the 5th house for Leos and the 6th for Virgos?
That would, no. We will talk about it when you see the chart, when we make it here in 10-15 minutes. You will get the answer to that question. It can be in Leo. The 5th house can be in Leo, but your 5th house can very well be in Sagittarius. But that means that all the energy of the Leo, will take place in Sagittarius, or all the energy of Sagittarius, if you will be taking place in the house of the 5th house of the house of Leo. Remember, the house is a place where things happen, and the sign is the energy. Do we get that? With that, are you at all ready to start setting up your own chart? All right. Is the best site of all sites out there is a site called astro.com. And it's run by a gentleman called Neil Mickelson, who is out in California. I've been using them since the early 70s, and they provide by far the best information about everything. So don't get on your computers now to try to mimic what I do here, because you lose. There's enough for you to get lost and you would lose out. But I want to share with you, before we even open up an account here, I want to share with you, it says horoscopes on the upper left hand here. You go there and you see it says here all about astrology. And then you click on understanding astrology. Okay, then you click on Astrology Basics, and then you click on Introduction to Astrology, and there you have the planets, the elements, the signs, the house system, the rulers, and the aspects. Much of the material that I just shared with you comes from there. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. But that's why I told you not to take any notes, because I have added to some of the explanations that are there. But that will give you a good ground understanding of what's going on. And there's a ton of other services, but I don't want you to get lost in it, and we're not going to get lost in it. We're going to start right now, and I will show you exactly what you need to do. So when you go to, you click on this My Astro tab up here on the right, and it says user profile. So I'm going to click on the user profile, and I have signed in. So I've created my own account here. I just created a dummy account under Premanadi for us to be able to do what we're doing today. But if you didn't have an account open, it would say log in, or if you haven't logged in, please open up your own account. All you have to do is to provide an email and a username address, and provide some very basic information. Nothing is invasive. It's just, you know, where you live or whatever, what state you are in or something like that. And then you log in, and every time you want to log into astro.com, you go to My Astro here and you log in. And immediately this user profile will show up. Okay, it says, hello, Mark. And on the bottom right here, you see it says add new astro data. So if I wanted to establish my own horoscope, I'm going to click it now, then this is going to show up. Okay, so we are going to put in a first name here. We're going to put Johnny Goodluck, and we're going to draw a chart for Johnny Goodluck. Actually, we're going to put the last name over here, like that. Johnny with a capital J. There we go. We're going to say he's a male. We are just going to choose an arbitrary birthday. Well, let's say he's born the 16th of. Let's just say he's born in July. Let's just say in, I don't know. Give me a year that you like. That you want to choose, Pramala. Give me any year. Anybody give me
1995.
1995. So Johnny Goodluck was born in 1995. We need to know when Johnny was born. What hour do you want to put? We have a whole.
Usually early in the morning, so about 7 a.m.
7 a.m. All right. 0 minutes. He was born right on the hour. Country. So here we need to do USA. Let's say.
USA. Yes.
Birth town. Let's say he was born in McKinney. Okay, so there's a McKinney, Texas there. It shows up, so I'm going to click that. So now we have all the specifics of Johnny Goodluck, okay? And you'll notice that on the upper edge here, it shows that the sun is in Cancer. This means that any person who is born on the 16th of July is a Cancer. The moon for this person is in Pisces, and the ascendant is in Cancer in 29 degrees and 7 minutes. That's at the very, very last minute or degree of Cancer. So the next sign over would be Leo. So there's going to be some tainting of Leo on this ascendant. Do we have any questions on what I did here and how to get to this point? This is very critical. If you can't get to this point, you can't set up your own chart. Are there any questions or any uncertainties or any lack of clarity? You go to astro.com, you click My Astro on top. Anytime you want to go to the site, to the Astro site, you have to click myastro.com. All right, so we are ready to press continue. Okay, it said here there was an error. I don't know what that happened there. What happened? Let's see. Add new astro
Delete
date.
marked detail.
Okay, delete.
Marked detail. So just go into the
You
edit.
want to delete? Okay, cancel. No astro data was selected. Okay, so edit. So what is the problem here? Other town. So let's choose another town. Maybe that's the problem. Let's say it was born in, let's say he was born in Dallas.
Okay. I don't think that's
Other town. I'm going to choose, I don't know if that's the problem either, but Dallas, Texas. There we go. Okay, mail, 1995, 7 a.m. Country, USA. And continue. Okay. So stored astro data. So there it is. So now we need to admit up here. All right. So now we're going to go to stored astro data. Why is this not on here? Okay. Stored astro data, basic settings for the user profile. If you're Mark Moore, you click here. Okay, log in. Okay, I hadn't logged in. That's the problem. Probably. Stored astro data. Okay. Let's see. Stored astro data. We have a problem here. Add new astro data. So we'll do it again. Johnny, good luck.
No, put the last name of the next
Yep.
line.
There we go. So a male, so let's say he was born the 13th of whatever, 13th of July, what did we say, 1994? Let's change it.
Yeah.
Hour at 7 a.m. And no
Let's
minutes.
put 7:10. Let's put 7:10. Let's put 10 minutes just in
10
case.
minutes there,
it was
okay.
Something.
Birth
USA,
town,
McKinney or Dallas.
we'll
Yeah.
put Dallas here. Dallas, Texas. There we go. And it's important that the birth town be given because that denotes the longitude and latitude. Continue. Okay, so we got two Johnny Goodluck. So let's take a look at this one here. Okay, I just click that name now and this comes up and this is the normal where we need to be.
Right.
All right, so you see here, it says on the upper left corner, it says chart drawing, comma, ascendant. Quick access to your chart and calculations. So when you do your chart, the first thing you want to do is you want to do the chart drawing. So I'm going to click that. And there's my chart, or Johnny Goodluck's chart. Boy, oh boy.
Oh no.
Johnny Goodluck has stuff going. So now I will bring us back to the discussion we had about karma and the red lines and the blue lines. The red lines, and I will describe and I will show you why in a second. This is a very good example, actually. The red lines are an example of things that need to be overcome that were not resolved in the previous life. And you will say, well, will it make a difference when they were born? A minute or two or three will make a difference. We have had Yeshua tell us, actually don't hold me to whether it was Yeshua or Michael, one of the two tell us that they will hold the birth for as long as they need to, or advance it as much as they need to make a given planetary combination be present in that person's life. For reincarnation purposes, the light is an absolute master at timings. So they know exactly when we should be born, and they make that birth happening so that we get the exact correct menu of problems and the right menu of tools to be used for that particular problem. So Johnny Goodluck here is going to have a very active life, I can tell you that, based on what we see. So let's first address the question that was asked before. will the fifth house always be in Leo and the sixth house always be in Virgo? And remember, I told you, no, it will not. Where is the ascendant for Johnny here? Well, the ascendant is this dark black line that goes across the screen. That is the horizon. When Johnny was born, the sun was above the horizon. Is that true, really? Well, yes, he was born at 7 a.m. in the morning. That was just after sunrise, wasn't it? So, so the chart shows also that Mercury was on top of the sky. Mars had spent a few hours on top of the sky. Saturn was on top of the sky, and all the other planets were below the horizon at the time, and they couldn't be seen from where he was born in Dallas at the time. If you were born, for example, in Singapore or in Buenos Aires, that horizon would look totally different because the planets that are above the horizon at that point are totally different. So there is an astronomical reality behind this. This is not just hearsay. There's an astronomical reality behind this. So we also notice here that the sun is in the sign of Cancer. That's very important. And the sun is in which house here? It's in the 12th house. Okay. So what that means is that Johnny's life endeavors will center around the 12th house. You can immediately say that when you look at a chart. I will digress to answer the question I didn't answer about the fifth house. Where is the fifth house? Where does it start? You see the line here that goes down to Scorpio? The fifth house for Johnny is in Scorpio, right? The sixth house is in Sagittarius. And the houses here are areas where things will happen. So let's just take an example. You've got, for example, Venus in the second house. Venus stands for what? Compassion, love, arts, all the good things about Venus. Remember that? Venus is an easy one to remember. But where is it located? It's located in the second house. What does the second house stand for? Possessions, values, properties, things that you own, money, real estate, all those things. So do you think this person is going to love real estate, love money, love material values? You better believe it. Would this be a good sign for an art dealer? Yes, Johnny could be an art dealer with that aspect alone. Now we need to look at the rest of it to see if it matches. But now you understand how the houses are so important. The energy of Venus will be active in the field of the second house, which is the field of property, possessions, real goods, monies, things like that. Do you remember what the opposite of the second house was? It's the 8th house. Do you remember what was typical of that in the description that was given to you? Things that are being taken away, taxation, impositions. So the second house will give you benefits, the 8th house will take them away. And you'll notice that he has Saturn in the 8th house, and Saturn in the 8th house signifies that there will be some problems right there with precisely that. So that axis has some issues there. So we have Venus at play in the second house. Parenthetically, I will mention to you that you see this little sign that is right below the sign of Venus here. Don't worry about that. That's Chiron. This sign over here next to Pluto is the node. Don't worry about that. That's advanced astrology. We don't have to deal with that. They're not actual planets. They are celestial bearings that represent specific points where special, should I say, arcs intersect with each other in the heavens. So don't worry about that at this point, but they are important. But not for beginners. They're not important. Notice also on Venus here that it says 232. that means that the location of Venus in the chart is sitting at 2 degrees and 2 minutes and 32 seconds, or 2 degrees and 32 minutes, sorry, inside the sign of Virgo. The fundamentals that you absolutely must master is to know what are the signs of the zodiac in their successive order. I mean, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, etc. You should be able to absolutely spit them out. If I ask, start with Scorpio and give me the signs, you should be able to do the circumference and do the round of all the signs. That is really important, as is the physical symbol of the planets, without which you cannot survive. Any questions so far? No questions. All right. Let's move on. So you notice here that we have the red lines, and I told you that the red lines are the things that were not finished up in the last incarnation and that have to be worked on, and the blue lines represent the tools that you have to do that with, and the blue lines also represent the tools that you have successfully mastered in previous incarnations. I will add to that we all go through hundreds and hundreds of incarnations, if not thousands, from the beginning of the formation of our soul till we are here today. We have already done thousands of incarnations. And what the light will do, they will give you one incarnation in Leo, and you have to master that. And then they will do another incarnation in Scorpio. They will do all the incarnations. You will have to, you have all gone through that. And if there's an incarnation that you haven't done in Leo, it's coming. And they will do Leo with an ascendant in Cancer. They will do Leo with ascendant in Virgo. They will check you out with Leo ascendant in Taurus. Every incarnation will have one major configuration that you need to clear out, and you need to get rid of it as a problem, if you will, in your life. They want to see how you react to that. Just like in a reincarnation, one time your mother will be your mother, your current mother will be your mother. In the previous incarnation, your current mother was your sister. And in another one, she was your aunt. And in another one, she was your twin. And in another one, she was your boss, and so on and so forth. The same thing with astrology. You will go through every aspect. So this is the one for Johnny. Good luck. Now, you will notice that the red lines represent 90-degree angles, or they can represent 45-degree angles. In this chart, there are very few 45-degree angles, okay? So if you wanted to see what the angle is between the planets, I will go through with you what's on the left side of the screen here. The name of the person on the upper left corner, when he was born, Wednesday, July the 13th in 94 at 7:10 a.m. in this place. And we're using a method for the house system that is called Placidus. The way the houses are calculated here was designed by a person called Placidus. Don't worry about that. There are multiple house systems. There's an equal house system. There's the German house system. There's many of them. Don't use Placidus. It will give you the most accurate reading for what we're trying to do here. The sun sign of this person is Cancer. The ascendant is also Cancer. So we have a double Cancer here. And then this lists all the planets, and it lists their respective signs. For example, the moon is in 17 degrees Virgo, 51 minutes and 11 seconds. Mercury is in 1 degree Cancer, and so on and so forth. Neptune is in 21 degree Capricorn. Well, let's see if Neptune is in 21 degree Capricorn. Here's Capricorn right here, over here, the green sign. And you see Neptune right here. It's listed at actually 22 because, no, it's at 21:59. So it's listed at 22 just for roughing it. So, so there's our Neptune right there, and we have the other planets there. Then this little box here represents fire, air, earth, and waters, of course. Fire, air, earth, and water. This person has all these planets in water signs. He has these planets in earth signs, one planet in air signs. So this is not a much of an air person, and almost nothing in fire. No planets, only the MC, the imaging surely here. Remember the goal in life, the aspirations, where that person is heading. So there's a lot of water stuff going on here, a lot of emotions. Remember how we deal with emotions, how we handle them, and how we transmit them to other people. Then you will see here CFM, that stands for cardinal, fixed, and mutable. I don't want to spend time today spending too much time on that, but I want you to go and check it out on the internet when we're off the screen here. What does a cardinal sign mean? There are 4 cardinal signs. There are 4 fires. There are 4 fixed signs: Leo, Aquarius, Scorpio, and Taurus. And there are 4 mutable signs. So fixed signs, I can tell you, are very much related to stable things, unrockable things are not being changed, etc. So we are ready to take a look at what's going on here. And I'm going to show you a very simple tool here. So let's just take any aspect you want here. Do you want to choose an aspect to look at here? The more important planet that will have more personal impact on you will be the faster planets: Mars, Mercury, the Sun, Venus, and the Moon. The slower planets are the planets that are on the outside of Mars: Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. And by the way, just for the record, it's not Uranus, it's Uranus. Don't make the pronunciation mistake, please. So does anybody want to look at a specific aspect here that is as close as possible?
Let's look at the sun.
Let's look at the sun. That's a good choice. Why? Because the sun is the most important planet in our horoscope. So we notice here that the sun is opposing Neptune, right? The sun is opposing Neptune. This chart, which is on the bottom left of the screen, shows the angles between the aspects between all the planets. So let's go to the intersection of the sun, which is here, and Neptune, which is here. The intersecting box is right at my finger there. Can you see that, everybody? Can you see the intersecting box right here? That's the intersection between the sun that shows the aspect that exists between Sun and Neptune. If there was no aspect between them, that box would be blank. There happened to be in opposition. You see that? The 2 circles? And it says -1. That means that there's 1 degree difference. There's 1 degree tolerance. So that's a very exact opposition. I mean, the sun is at 2053, which is almost 21 degrees. Neptune is sitting at 22 degrees, actually 2159.39. So that's just almost an exact opposition. So what does that mean? Do you remember what the attributes of Neptune was? Well, I don't hear too many answers, so we need to look it up. So I'm going to go to Google now, and I'm going to type in Sun opposition Neptune natal chart. It's important that you type in natal chart because there are different types of charts that you can look at. Okay, so I'm looking at Sun opposition Neptune natal chart. I press enter and this shows up. Here you see a whole menu of options for you to look at, you know, the various interpretations that various astrological entities have for certain things. Cafe Astrology, for example, is a quite good one. Let's look at Sun-Neptune aspects in the natal chart. It will give you every aspect of Sun-Neptune. You see, it says Sun conjunct Neptune. You see the conjunct sign there between Sun and Neptune right in front of it? Is the Sun conjunct Neptune in Johnny's chart?
It's oppositional.
It's
oppositional.
It's opposite. So square or
Mhm.
opposition. Aha. If they're putting square and opposition in the same box, that means that there could be trouble brewing, because a square is not exactly a positive one. So let's look here. These people born under a challenging aspect between Sun and Neptune often struggle with the desire to be something special or to experience something more than the ordinary. They are daydreamers. Aha, they're in the cloud all the time. And idealists. It is easy for these people to trust others, even and perhaps especially people who might seem from the outside looking in as unsavory types. They are looking to identify with something beyond what is normally expected of people. Most have in common a childhood that didn't help the natives direct or define their lives. Perhaps the early family was lacking in supervision. In other words, what we're describing here is Sun, your body, and Neptune, the complete evasiveness and uncertainty that is so typical for Pisces. You know, the sign of Pisces, which Neptune rules, is represented by two fish. Those two fish are depicted in opposite directions if you look at their drawings or the sign, the emblem, meaning it could go one way, but it could also go the other way. Pisces often don't know that. They just, you know, well, I can do this. Oh yeah, no, but I can also do that. They will follow whatever it's in the air, if you will. Let's go back. Let's pick out another one. Let's go to Astromatrix here. See, oops, that's an error service there. I don't know what happened there. Astromatrix has a problem. Okay, so let's go to Sun opposite natal and transit. So we're not looking for transit. We'll deal with that next week. We're looking for natal, Sun opposite Neptune natal. Far from being competitive, people born during the Sun opposite Neptune transit prefer to avoid conflict as much as possible in order to protect their fragile ego. If abused or subjected to any form of violence, they're becoming weaker. Remember, they're Pisces. They're not aggressive at all. When others are threatening them, they tend to run away, but they also use different strategies in order to get the power. Now, little Johnny here is a Cancer, and a Cancer is going to move away from conflict by crabbing like a crab under a stone, under a rock, and avoid conflict. Therefore, they can become deceptive. They can become big liars and cheating players. However, I can tell you, I don't know if you've read about the story about this congressman in New York called Santos, who has been a pathological liar on everything he has done in his life, basically. He was elected to Congress under absolutely false pretenses based on his curriculum vitae. You need to see what Neptune is doing in his chart. You will laugh, I mean, all the way as you read it. Okay, I will continue reading here. As a matter of fact, this could tremendously hurt their ego and leave them lacking of any trace, etc., self-confidence. In such a situation, they should just be direct and address any issue they may be having with others, because things in their life will get to be soon understood. Okay, so what I'm showing you here are there are multiple opinions of what Sun opposing Neptune means, can mean, couldn't mean, has a potential to mean. And once you read that, you should easily be able to realize that, aha, and whenever you have a planet that is opposite the Sun and it hits Neptune here or any other planet, that is an issue. Now you notice that Johnny also has a fairly close opposition to Uranus. It's quite close. So let's go and see Sun Uranus and see what that could mean in his natal chart. Okay. Let's go to
Cafe Astrology.
Cafe Astrology, we can do that. Okay. Sun conjunct Uranus.
No.
Sun square or opposition Uranus. The ego is quite large when the Sun is square or opposite Uranus. This is largely due to the fact that these people's very identities ride on their sense of personal freedom. Remember that Uranus is the planet of personal freedom. Don't bind me, don't chain me, don't lock me in, don't cage me. That's Uranus. It can be quite a challenge. And by the way, that's what's going to happen when we go into the fourth density. In the age of Uranus, we're going to have that sense of personal freedom that, we need to get out of things, okay? We need to get out of the way we've been doing it. It can be quite a challenge to get them to do what they don't want to do because they're oppositional, right? They see any attempts to push them in a certain direction as threatening their freedom. So this is Johnny here is not going to be an easy child to deal with. He's going to be contrarian to his parents, but I mean big time. These are very dynamic individuals who question tradition and authority, yet paradoxically are quite set in their own ways. That's actually a very good paragraph as a description for how the Sun opposition Uranus is. So now you see where the character of the various planets come into play. So let's do something else. We have a few more minutes, so I want to do, for example, let's just take, for example, here we see them. Let's take something that is. Let's take Mars, for example, here. Mars, you see Mars here. It's in Gemini, and it is in the 11th house. Can you see that? The 11th house starts in Taurus, but Mars is in the 11th house, squarely, smack in the middle of it. What does it mean when Mars is in the 11th house? Okay, so again, we go to Google and we put Mars in 11th house, natal, because we want to look at the birth chart. That's what that means. We press enter, and here we go. Remember, I told you that. It's funny when I see that here now on the screen. I told you in my little introduction video that I sent to you 4 or 5 days ago that in Indian astrology, they show the chart as a square. Here's a square that they use in India. That's how their chart looks like. Because they see an incarnation as an obstacle because you haven't gotten rid of karma. And that's why they're presented as a square. We in the Western world use a circle as a completion of a new birth. Anyways, long story, but that's what that is. So advanced astrology, natal Mars in 11th house. I accept the cookies. Mars in the 11th house is the birth, in the birth chart, is a bewitching placement. It suggests that you love to put yourself out there. You make friends easily and you're charismatic. Why is that? Because Mars is an energy of activity. The 11th house, do you remember, is the house of friends and acquaintances. So when you start putting Mars in the 11th house, you are going to be a very active, that activity of Mars is going to take place with your friendships. But there could be problems coming too. People with displacement are creative and have a lot of energy. And this helps them realize their goals in life. Being around others make you feel more energized. Of course, Mars is in the 11th house. If you have your Mars in the 11th house in the horoscope, keep reading. In this article, you can find out the placement of Mars in various means in astrology, etc. Anyways, let's leave that and let's go back to our astrology chart. Now, you see, Mars is in the 11th house. There's going to be activity with what? With social acquaintances, friends, and so on and so forth. That's important. And there's a lot of energy with that, with Johnny. He's going to be good with friends. He's going to have a lot of buddies. That's going to be an active field. Is that energy positive or is that energy negative? Well, look at this. You have Saturn here. You see this line here? That's a red line that denotes that there is close to 90 degrees between Mars and Saturn. We have from 6 degree Gemini to 6 degree Taurus is 30 degrees, to 6 degrees Aries is 60 degrees, and to 6 degrees Pisces is 90 degrees, and he's sitting at 12. So there's a 6 degree tolerance, which is plenty fine. He has a square. Now that's, remember, Saturn can be the planet of inhibition and problems. So let's look at the relationship between Mars and Saturn in the horoscope and see how it translates. Mars square Saturn natal. Okay, Mars square Saturn natal chart. There we go. All right, so here we go. We can just read the very first one here that is given to us by Google. The Mars-Saturn square in the natal chart means you sometimes alternate between enthusiasm and apathy, and you can change your mood very quickly. Aha! Johnny is very capable of getting a lot of friends. He has Mars in the 11th house, but he's also very capable of leaving them because he's moody. The Mars square Saturn transit, so this is not a transit. So let's do another one here. Let's go back to, let's see, Astromix here. Natal Mars, oops, we seem to have a problem with that one. Astrology, that's the one we're in. Cafe Astrology, let's do that. Okay, conjunct Mars square or opposition Saturn. You are a perfectionist. You can pick at yourself and others unmercifully, trying to get circumstances in your life to match some unspecified standard. Your energy becomes freer to work in an unencumbered way when you realize that you aren't looking to match an objective standard at all. What you want is to find some emotionally and psychologically defendable ground to stand on. The real trick in life for you is to keep moving. You see, because Saturn is a stabilizer that has a tendency to keep you in one spot and not to move. Think of Taurus, which is, or think of, for example, not Taurus because it's ruled by Venus, but Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. I mean, Capricorns move very, very slowly. And they always move in an upward direction, by the way, and they move very slowly. They go from one shelf on a mountain to the next shelf, and they stay there, and then they go to the next shelf and they stay there. So the real trick in life is to move. This is not easy, since you should really only move ahead on the project after forethought or planning. Your judgments tend to be colored by your fears or your momentary desires. You work very hard for what comes to you, etc., etc. This is unavoidable, but you can end up working very hard for no gain, etc., etc. So if Johnny has that disposition in his chart, that is going to affect him. But then you will also notice that he has a square to, you see here, the square to Venus, right here, Venus at 2 degrees Virgo, and he has an opposition to Saturn. So this triangular, remember, triangles are very strong energies. They're almost undefeatable. He has it in almost in a perfect triangle here. So that whole Mars-Venus problem, this is problem with women, by the way, Mars and Venus, these entanglements with females, and the problems with Saturn, which is stability, meaning he's unstable, possibly with, remember, in this case, Venus is in the second house, the house of material values. So I've shown you, and we're going to finish up and wrap this thing up, but I've shown you the very basic, elemental beginner steps for you to start navigating and where to get an understanding of what things mean. If you want to look at, for example, what ascendant means in Cancer, because Johnny has his ascendant in Cancer, you go on Google, you type in ascendant in Cancer, and you press Google, and you will have a plethora of options of how to interpret them. Read several of them, don't just read one. And then let's just say that I had sun in Cancer or ascendant in Cancer, I would look it up and I would say, wow, that really resonates with me. This person has a very good understanding and depiction of what sun ascendant in Cancer means. And then you know that that's a reliable interpretation because you know yourself extremely well. And the best way to use astrology is to compare your chart with how you are. So here's the homework for next time we meet. I want you to go on astro.com. I want you to enter in your data, of course, with everything. I want you to draw up your chart, and I want you to look at it. And then what we will do, and I guarantee, if you have an interest in doing it, we'll do a share screen on whoever wants to do it, and we can all discuss what we're looking on at the screen. Of course, that will not be put on a video on YouTube, obviously, because it's just between us here. But I want you to do your homework. So here's the homework. Draw your own chart, number one. Number two, learn the fundamentals of the signs and their symbols and of the planets. I want you to know them all, and I also want you to know all the characteristics. If I ask you what is the characteristics of an Aquarius, you need to be able to tell me that. I didn't do it today because you can go, it would be too long and we wouldn't be out of here, but you can go on Google, you can either go Google or you can go where I told you to go here on Astro on the side, go to Basics of Astrology, Introduction to Astrology, and you can find out about all the signs and everything, plus read about articles. All right?
We do have one question. Wendy posed a question. How do the zodiac signs in the 11th and 8th house square influence Johnny?
In the 11th and 12th house?
8th house square influence Johnny.
Okay, we don't look at the houses will always be in drawing here, they will always be roughly square. You will notice that, for example, the 12th house starts right here at the very, let's say 25 degrees Gemini. The 9th house starts in 17 degrees or so Pisces. So they're not directly exactly square. And we don't look at whether the 8th house is square to the 12th house or the 1st house is square to the 4th house. They always will be, because if you divide a pie into 12 parts, almost in the middle, you will get the houses that are roughly square to each other. So that has no impact. What has an impact is the houses in them, the aspects between the bodies in the charts. Remember, the houses are areas where things happen. The astrological signs are the general disposition and character of the individual. The planets represent the energies. So you will always have a multiplicity of aspects and influences. So it's not like, oh, he has that, he is like that. There will always be a moderator. It's like, you know, I'll give you an example that happens in the media. For example, when people look at, for example, Meghan Markle, you know, I'm talking about psychologists and psychiatrists who look at her from her public persona. Some people will say, oh, she's a selfish person. Another person will say, she's just an attention seeker. Another person will say, oh, she's a narcissist. Another person will say, she's a victim of race, race relations. Another person would say this, and a person would say that. There are various ways of interpreting things. There's not one solution to everything. And in a chart, there's not one solution to everything, but you need to start to build a process. And the best way to do it is to do your own chart. And then once you've done your own chart, then you can basically assess what a specific angle, aspect, planetary position means. Are you all with me on that? So the angles between the houses don't mean anything. Some houses will be tighter, some will be larger. it depends on the longitude and latitude where you were born. If Johnny were born with the same time of birth, but in a different city, let's say, I don't know, Sydney, Australia, his houses will be totally, totally different. You can just play with it and try it online. You can, the site is free. They also have a professional version of it that you can pay for. I've never done that because I enjoy the free version, but feel free to do it if you feel like it. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.